Well, looks like the console I ordered won't get in time for Rayman 2, so let's play an indie game. But what should we play? For clarification's sake, I'm looking mainly in the Switch eShop for this one, since it seems this service has been overflowing with new indie games every week. There's bound to be something fun here. In June of 2018, Nintendo said they were aiming for 20 to 30 indie game releases on their online eShop per week. Mind you, games had already been coming in at a steady stream ever since the console started selling like hotcakes, so at the point of June, around 20 releases a week was only nudging the bar a little higher. Of course, there aren't really that many games required to come out at the same time as yours to have it be swallowed in the tidal wave of releases. Whether or not your game gets overlooked also depends on the amount of expectations the other games carry with them. Obviously, releasing a low-profile indie game along a high-profile AAA game, like, say, Mario, is gonna drown out the independent one. So, while Muro Studios' first game on the Switch, Shadowbug, didn't really have a lot of competition in the quality department, what it did have was a lot of competitors nonetheless. There's also the matter of how you present the game on the eShop. In Shadowbug's case, it presents itself as it looks in-game, as it should in my opinion, with a silhouette of our hero on a painted background. The only problem with this, and maybe even more so on the Google Play Store and Apple Store, which the game released on first, is the fact that there are already a huge selection of games like this that looks just the same, with the silhouettes of the characters, enemies, and the foreground being laid over a background image, which makes the game seem really bland. This is a stylistic choice that was probably, if I had to guess, popularized by the 2010 game Limbo. But that is also where the comparisons to Limbo stop, because instead of the dreary backgrounds in that game, Shadowbug has some beautiful art for you to gaze at instead. It doesn't seem like Limbo was the only artistic inspiration for this game either. When loading up a level, you get this cool little piece of art, depending on which part of the game you've selected a level from, which is almost kinda eerie, because the last game I reviewed, Rayman, also did this, and I liked it a lot actually, so it's nice to see the idea returning here in an indie title. Honestly, it's a really pretty game too. The background in the levels will change periodically as you venture deeper into the forest, slowly becoming more and more industrial and futuristic as you make your way into the heart of an unknown factory. Environmental hazards are for the most part the only thing that have any color to them in the foreground to, make them easily distinguishable from the rest of the level. Mostly spikes and saw blades colored in red with some green radioactive liquid here and there. You'd think that it'd be hard to spot the enemies when everything almost meshes together, but the designers made a good job of making them stand out by taking special care not to obscure them, only placing them at spots where they're easy to notice against the background. The enemies are for the most part only there for you to jump between. See, in Shadowbug you play as, well, Shadowbug, and he's an insect ninja guy. What kind of insect, you ask? Honestly, I have no idea, but I sure hope it won't find its way into my bedroom because this guy is ferocious. The way you progress in this game is by jumping between monsters. This is done by pointing at the monster you want to kill and pressing a button. Other than that, the only thing you can do is walk around, so this is effectively your jump and your attack combined into one move. In the Switch version, you execute said move by utilizing the gyro sensor to make your controller act as a pointer. To be fair to the developers here, they made do with what they had to work with. The gyrometer pointer works well enough for the most of the game, but it's during the more hectic levels that the drawbacks start to rear their heads. The gyrometer transmits precision data based on how your controller is positioned relative to a fixed point of reference which exists inside your controller. But what happens when that point gets nudged slightly to the side? I'm not going to pretend to know the fine mechanics of how these things work, but the point is that whatever it is that senses your position actually isn't very good at remembering your starting point, so you'll more often than not end up steering slightly off course over time. With the Wii Motion Plus, this wasn't really that big of a deal, since it used the IR camera for pointing as an added measure. to figure out how you held the Wiimote. With a Switch Pro controller, or the recommended Joy-Cons, you have to manually reset the point of reference every now and then, and when you do, the cursor kinda just snaps back to the middle of the screen, purely independent of if your controller is aligned with it or not. In the middle of certain levels, when you need to act quickly, and this is especially true during long segments, you might find yourself having to point the controller in the middle of the screen, reset the gyro sensor with Y, and then quickly point over to the enemy you need to jump to before it's too late. Much like this explanation, it can be disorienting, to say the least. What's not disorienting, however, is the level design. New enemies are always placed where you can see them from a safe distance, and the developers go to great lengths of introducing each new gimmick in a safe environment before you're thrust into action. It's the ABCs of game design, true, but seeing it implemented this cleanly is always a joy. My favorite level by far has to be Slimy Hands. You can kind of feel that this level is special as soon as it starts up. The music has an eerie feel to it, there's toxic dust slowly falling to the ground, and certain parts of the floor is different. It's only when you step on or under these areas that you notice just how different they are. Because if you stand still for a second, bubbles start appearing under your feet, and another second later, a slimy hand sprouts from the ground and tries to grab you. This is maybe the only time in the game you're not safe as they're introducing a new gimmick. When you start the level, you're led towards the right, in which you end up at a dead end. Now what, you might think? But before you can finish that thought, the aforementioned hand is already well on its way down to grab you from the ceiling. I just really like how this is set up with how the atmosphere is in the stage. I really wish they'd utilize this gimmick a bit more though. I feel like there's a lot of potential here. Sadly, at the end of the level, you encounter the source of the slimy hands in the form of a boss fight. Well, it's not your regular boss fight, kind of more of a chill one compared to the others. You need to guide his hand down pipes so that it ultimately reaches a lever that crushes him and gives you the key for the door blocking your exit. Like I said, this is a pretty easygoing boss, even though it's smack in the middle of the game. You can just stand off to one side and he can't really do anything to you. In fact, he won't do anything unless you agitate him, which can't be said for the other bosses. The first boss is actually just a stage you need to get through titled March, and as the name implies, there's a lot of marching going on. Basically, you just cut through a bunch of enemies being shot out of pipes until you reach the end. This can be a little more tricky than it seems, but it's all worth it as we end up by driving one of the machines that's spitting out enemies through a bunch of the little rascals, and then land in an arena where we fight a digging machine. Timing and using the flying enemies to your advantage is key here. Second off, we have the cutter, a huge machine used presumably for cutting down trees. The design wouldn't have you guess that. No, not at all. Here you have to manage the flying enemies overhead to make sure you always have an escape route. Another fun boss, if not a little frustrating for the fact that you're never really sure when the saw blade is going to re-emerge from the vehicle after you made it hit the waste barrels in the ground, which makes it kinda tricky to gauge when to dodge upwards, and yeah, you know. Then finally, out of the forest we have Mr. Sticky Hands, which we've already talked about, and at the end of the sewers, a big freaking fish. I feel that this is also kinda reminiscent of Rayman. There isn't actually a fight going on here, you just have to avoid the creature as the toxic slug rises by jumping between the fishes, and then crush the monstrosity by stepping on a switch when you reach the top. The gyro pointer can be a bit cumbersome during this stage though. However, it looks like we've jumped out of the frying pan and into the fire. If you thought rising water levels and short bursts of aerial navigation were bad, how would you feel about spinning lasers, homing shots, and constant aerial escapades? Because that's what you're getting when you're going up against a core guard. Honestly, the bosses in Shadowbug all follow a simple formula. The boss goes through an attack pattern and then exposes its weak point in the progress. Then you attack it and the cycle repeats another 2 times. The only exceptions to this being Slimy Hands and that big fish. Then, what happens when you add a little bit of RNG into the mix? Frustration. That's what. After you've damaged this guy, he starts shooting out these homing shots. they go after you. But they can also hit the little robots around him that you use as targets to get around. And if you're extremely unlucky, they'll be, just off screen when you jump to one of them, and you'll get hit when you arrive or in the middle of your jump. The rest of his attacks are pretty easy to avoid as long as you're fast enough, but this one is probably the one that killed me the most. It's clear that this game emphasizes speed and quick thinking, and that's apparent from the beginning. The game ranks you in 3 categories, and you get 1 ninja star for clearing each of the requirements. 1 for finishing the level, 1 for going fast, and 1 for collecting enough points. Points are scattered around the stage, but you also get some by killing enemies. To simultaneously get the fastest time and the required orbs, you'll need to do a bit of path optimizing. Most of the levels are short too, so it shouldn't take too long to get through it fast enough. You also can't die during your try. The timer kind of persists through death if you reach a checkpoint, which is infinitely infuriating in levels that are long and have borderline unfair obstacles. I mean, look at this! This level is the sole reason I won't be trying to 100% this game ever, because this is absolute horse crap. Other than the ninja stars, there's also these big glowing balls to collect. There's 1 in each level, and I actually collected all of these, but I don't know why I bothered, because they don't seem to unlock anything as far as I can see. Then at the end of it all awaits the big bad final boss. The thing is just a big robot face with pipes for a nose, but I'm getting ahead of myself here. You start off on a platform surrounded by these incubation capsules filled with monsters. Turns out these things are being mass produced and sent out to take over the forest or something. After you destroy them all, the final boss appears with a roar and the true fight begins. And if you're like me, his first attack will probably take you off guard and he'll kill you. Oh well, at least I won't have to do that first part all over. God damn it. Nope, no checkpoints for you, my friend. Oh well. So you do it all again, actually dodge his first attack this time, and then he starts to shoot even more enemies out of his noses. There's a catch though. He's also spinning. What you need to do is follow him around, since there's a barely noticeable laser that will end you if you don't do anything. Since he's shooting enemies all around, there's also the risk of you getting caught by one of them in midair. Surprisingly, this only happened to me 3 or 4 times, but all of those times it was beyond my control to dodge them, since they were either shot out directly at me or fell down from above. Annoying. After this, you need to quickly run over to the right to latch onto his weak point before it's too far away. But yet again, you're going to be surprised, because as soon as you hit him, he'll start spinning around, and if you so much as touch him, you're dead. Great. If you somehow manage to avoid that last-ditch attack, he'll destroy the ground and you'll fall down the floor. Rinse and repeat. Ah, crap! I died again! But surely there has to be a check. Oh, for God's sake. Nope! Like, this is my main complaint about this boss. Every time you die, you have to do this monotonous first part again. After a while, it just gets old. A better solution, in my opinion, would be to make this part harder, or just plain out different, and then place a checkpoint after you clear it. That way your players wouldn't have to go through the segment so many times that you eventually just die out of frustration because you're trying to get it over with as quickly as possible. But anyways, after the third and final hit, the machine goes down and the core turns into a big shiny rock, which I'm still not completely sure what is, to be honest. Then you're dropped into the best level of the game, the credits! Jokes aside, this is a fun level, if just for the fact that you can skip the credits by killing the game developers really fast. There's even a leaderboard for fastest completion here too, in which, at the time of writing, I am in 2nd place. You watch the factory in the distance burn to the ground, and that's it. Game over. I really liked Shadowbug, even despite its flaws. The gyro controls feels like they need some work, some of the levels have sharp difficulty spikes, and some of the bosses can be very frustrating to deal with. But at the end of the day, the gorgeous art, the level design, and not to mention the charm of the game more than makes up for it. It's a light 2D platformer that shouldn't take more than 4 hours to complete. In fact, I had only intended to play it for a little bit while I waited for my anime to download, but instead ended up playing the whole thing through. Part of it was, of course, because it's not that long, but it's also because I enjoyed the game all the way through. That's why it's such a shame that the game has seemingly not gotten very much attention. A quick look at its Metacritic page reveals only a few critic reviews, and even fewer user reviews. So if you need to kill a couple of hours, I highly recommend picking up this game, either for PC via Steam, for Android or iOS via its respective app stores, or for Nintendo Switch via the eShop. You know, for such a short game, the video sure did get long. I don't know if it feels like I just keep repeating stuff and going too far in depth there, but then again, who the hell cares? I do what I want. Muro Studios, the creators of Shadowbug, actually has another game out there. I believe it's called Shadowbug Rush. It's for iOS and Android, and if you look at the number of downloads, it seems like this game has actually garnered much more attention than Shadowbug did. It looks like they seemingly expand on some of the ideas of the original game, but then again, I wouldn't know since I haven't checked it out. But we won't be taking a look at that game yet. I finally have what I need to record Rayman 2, so I'll see you guys in 2 weeks. When my review of Rayman 2 hits the tube. Are you allowed to say that? The tube? Anyways, see you guys then.